there is a silent enemy currently internally eating your manhood. And I don't mean just your sexual organ. I mean eating the whole of your manhood, not leaving any part of it throughout your body. You might wonder, what is that? Well, if you haven't heard of low testosterone, I'm here today to tell you about what it is and how it affects every man, particularly if you're over 50. Now, why do I say it does eat your manhood? Well, simply because it goes after everything that makes a man is in your body. It goes after everything that makes you look like a man. Now, let's give some examples historically, which makes you actually understand the picture very well. In those days, it was known that some emirs, some Islamic emirs who gathered harems of women for their own personal use, they normally got a man or men to look after them, and what they did was they castrated the men. And those men, we all know why they were castrated, so that they can look after the women without obviously doing anything to the women. But the consequences of those castrations physically to the men were quite stark. The men suddenly became very soft. They had round faces, they had round bulgy eyes, and they lost muscle, and they literally became women all but name. Now, we also got, by the way, other examples historically again about some choir boys on the Christian side, wherein some boys were apparently castrated to give them that very high-pitched voice, so that when they sing in the choirs, their voices will really be high-pitched. And again, it had similar results. Those boys had high pitches like women, and they never became men again. Now, I just give you those two examples to tell you what it feels like if that enemy I've just referenced in your system was allowed to wreak havoc. And that enemy is actually loss of or lower testosterone in your body. And testosterone, in effect, is what makes you a man. It is the hormone, if you like, the juice, the man juice, that makes you have deeper voice, is that juice that makes you have facial hair, is the one that gives you the muscles you have as a man, and also is the one that gives you the strong bones, that ultimately makes you look like a man, makes you very different from a woman. Now, that's what really is what low testosterone attacks. It makes those things disappear. Now, you can also think about modern day life. I've given two historical examples of the eunuchs who look after the women of in the harems. I've also given example of the eunuchs. But you also probably know today, there are some men who undergo surgical operations to change themselves to females, and they literally look like women after they've done that. Now, what that tells you, there is something in our system as men that makes us men. So it's not the fact that you were just born a man, it's not the physics, it's not the mass, it's actually something hormonal that's driving us to stay as men and really look as men throughout our lives. Now, it is that tends to disappear slowly, unnoticed, in most men in modern life, that makes us become low testosterone, and ultimately, not as dramatic as the operations I've talked about, but ultimately it turns you into a female. Now, I don't want to be offensive, but if you are somebody with low testosterone, and typically it's associated with things like metabolic syndrome, high visceral fat, and low muscle, if you've got those conditions, the likelihood is you will have even boobs, women's boobs. You'll have big breasts, you'll have nipples, you have everything that makes you become softer, just like a woman. Now, that's no accident, that's not a biological mishap, that's just because the testosterone, which used to send the signal to make you a man, is suddenly lowered. And therefore the body, which then triggers what we call estrogen, that takes over and it dominates your system. You suddenly start to become a woman. It's not dramatic, and therefore people don't notice it, but it does happen slowly but surely. It will ultimately happen. Now, so that's what is really happening to men. Now, I've talked about in this channel a lot about muscle mass, how we should maintain our muscle because it's good for our health. I've talked about keeping our fat low, and particularly visceral fat. But the third horseman, the thing that goes with those two, is actually low testosterone. So the syndrome is low muscle mass, high fat, particularly high visceral fat, and actually low testosterone. Now, if you look at the maths, what tends to happen is from the ages of, say, 30 upwards, we tend to lose muscle mass, and I've got videos about this, by about 1% a year. And we tend to gain fat, particularly visceral fat, again by 1% a year. Now, guess what? We tend to lower our testosterone, if we do nothing about it, by another 1% a year. So you got a combination of this trio, the three amigos. They go after you as a man, they ultimately emasculates you, turns you to a female. Do not allow that to happen. Now, you might wonder, so how do I avoid that happening? It's very simple. If you find it's already happened, and if it's severe, well, you might wonder, so what is severe? let's talk about the measurements a little bit. Now, the measurements are not an exactitude, but the measure is from 0 to 1,000. That's just the convention. Now, the medical clinics, which are governed by the government, normally are very conservative. The reason? Because their measurements come from the general population, and the general population already are under an epidemic of low testosterone anyway. And therefore, when they measure that, they use a distribution. Low is really, really low because they are taking the average. Now, but let's use that for a second. Today, most of governments will give a guideline that you have to have at least 300 to be considered for TRT, right, testosterone replacement therapy. Now, that means they will help you, give you some medical attention to boost up your testosterone. Now, 300 is extremely low out of 1,000. Now, even in any score, if you are to get 3 out of 10, that is really bad, but they still accept that if you get 350, you are not allowed TRT in some countries, according to some laws. Now, I will say you need more than double that. You need at least 600 to just be at the baseline. Otherwise, for something that where you should be scoring 1,000, now, not many people get 1,000. If you are 6 out of 10, probably you are in your starting line, not 300. And some people even have got 200, which is way below the testosterone level of a 13-year-old girl. So we really must not just be judged by what is being measured out there by the doctors, by the medical professionals. Even though I'm not a doctor, if you are going to be using medical professionals, please use it, because I'm not advising you against that. But I'm just saying, common sense tells you that if 1,000 is what the best scenario is, 200 cannot be good. 300 cannot be good. So just bear that in mind. Today, I'm not going to be talking too much about the medical intervention. I want to talk about how nature intended it. What can you do without having to, first of all, leave it so bad so you have to take TRT, the medical intervention? What can you do to actually make sure your testosterone does not go down? Or even if it went down, you can actually reverse it up. It's very simple. It's the same things I've been talking about to address visceral fat. It's the same things I've been talking about to address muscle loss or sarcopenia. And what is that? You guessed it, strength training. If you do strength training in the way we prescribe, in EVERPRIME, we don't make it too difficult. If you want to know how we do it in EVERPRIME, in this channel, go to the first link in the description and you apply, and I will help you out. But let's move on. If you did strength training, just normal strength training, 3 or 4 times a week, as a man, whatever age, calibrated to your own strength, you will see low testosterone at bay totally. You will not have it in the first place. Well, even if you had it and you started late, it's not too late for you. You can still reverse it. You still grow your testosterone. And I've noticed this personally myself. I mean, I'm 64 years of age now. 2 years ago, when I was 62, I had metabolic syndrome, which causes low testosterone. And I had all the hallmarks of low testosterone, including low mood, fatigue, and everything else that goes with it. And when I started my training, which reversed my trajectory at the time, up to the point I'm now, a lot of people will not tell even I'm even 64. So when I started that journey 2 years ago, the first thing I noticed is a boost in my testosterone. I started to feel absolutely juiced up, literally. I started to feel motivated. I started to feel absolutely energetic, not tired. I sleep very well, which is all the opposite of somebody who's got low testosterone. They become very tired, they become very moody, they become sleepless, they get sleep apnea, which is why testosterone is not even noticed by most people, because it can be confusing for just modern life. People think, oh, well, I'm tired, I'm moody, I don't sleep in the night, it's probably because money worries or this or that. Now, it might be confusing. That's why if you think you are getting those symptoms, get yourself tested. But only do the test, in my view, to get a gauge. Because those tests, like I've already said in the earlier section, do not rely 100% on just those tests. Just get a relative understanding of where the testosterone is. Once you understand that, I will recommend, before you begin to shove down tablets and liquids, unless if it is very severe, in which case I absolutely urge you to take that, because it's better to do that than to just decide not to do anything, because it's absolutely emasculating, it absolutely castrates you if you do not do something. Is eating enough protein. When you eat protein, it fuels your muscles, it enables you to grow the muscles, which then fights your estrogen, and then allows you to maintain the testosterone. So weight training, protein together will have that virtuous cycle that enable you to fight it. The other thing, which is sleep, and this is where people get confused. They think because they are not sleeping, they are tired, so it might not be low testosterone. But actually, there is a circular causation between them. If you do not sleep very well, you don't get that REM level of sleep, you tend to cause a lot of stress in your body, and that could actually affect your testosterone. It will lower it, and the combination of these factors will affect your testosterone. You notice here, I've not emphasized anything to do with TRT. It does not mean there isn't a role for TRT. It just means it's not the first thing you should reach out for. As far as I'm concerned, the natural causation for it are things like having low muscle mass, low strength, and not eating enough protein, and potentially not getting yourself to sleep and rest very well. In effect, we should even all learn to be a sleep expert. I mean, sleeping is not just something you do, you collapse because you're tired. You should literally know how to sleep well, and that together with strength training and high protein will definitely give you the conditions that allows your testosterone to rise. If it doesn't rise, at least it will slow down the growth. Now, here is the final thing I want you to note. If you are somebody who is over 40, do not ignore the fact that you might be losing testosterone at the rate of at least 1% every year. This is silent. It's not visible, unlike fat, wherein you will see the actual fat. Unlike visceral fat, where you see your tummy. I've got a video about that, which you can go and listen to after this one. Unlike lack of muscle, wherein you can visually see yourself very, very soft, you cannot see it. Testosterone slowly is being lost, and what happens is it fuels the other things. It fuels the lack of muscle. It fuels the fact that you do not have enough appetite to be eating protein. It actually ensures that you develop taste for things like high glycemic foods, and the vicious cycle continues, and suddenly you find yourself in a metabolic syndrome. You find yourself with a large amount of visceral fat, and that in turn turns the small amount of testosterone you have into estrogen. And just like testosterone is the male hormone, estrogen is the female hormone. Now, once you get a lot more estrogen in your system, more than required, and you have far less testosterone as a man than you need, you are in a slippery slope. You are literally becoming a woman day by day. You do not want that to happen. Now let's go.